Tonight, when your head starts pounding, you're going to open a cabinet, shake two pills into your palm, and swallow them with water without a single thought. No prayer, no ritual, no fear that this headache means you're going to die. For nearly all of human history, that same headache could mean something else entirely: a curse, a spirit, a verdict. And the way people responded to it is stranger, and in some ways, more advanced than you've been taught to believe. The answer changes everything we think we know about ancient medicine. Chapter 1: The Hole in the Skull. Let's start with the part that sounds like a horror movie. Trepanation, cutting a hole directly into a living human skull, is one of the oldest surgical procedures ever discovered. But here's what's fascinating. It wasn't botched guesswork. It worked, and often. In the 1990s, French neurosurgeon François-Xavier Guillaume and archaeologist collaborators reviewed a sample of trepanned skulls from Neolithic France. The bone around the wound showed clear signs of healing in a majority of them. New bone growth, smoothed edges. That means the patient survived the operation, sometimes by years. Some estimates put survival rates for certain trepanation sites above 50%. In an era with no anesthesia, no antibiotics, and a sharpened flint as the primary tool, that number should stop you. These people weren't guessing. They understood the skull well enough to operate on it and keep the patient alive. So why do it at all? Some researchers think it treated seizures, head trauma, or pressure from skull fractures. Others think it was spiritual, a way to release something that didn't belong. Probably it was both at once. Ancient medicine rarely separated the physical from the sacred. Chapter 2: The Toothache. 50,000 years old. So if humans could operate on skulls, what did they do for something smaller? A stomach ache? An infection? The answer came from an unlikely place: dental plaque. In 2012, archaeologist Karen Hardy and her team, working with samples from the El Sidrón cave site in Spain, analyzed calcified plaque on the teeth of Neanderthal remains dated to around 50,000 years ago. Inside, they found chemical traces of chamomile and yarrow, two plants with almost no nutritional value, but well-documented medicinal properties. Bitter. Not something you'd eat for pleasure. One individual in the sample had a dental abscess and intestinal parasites, and the plant compounds in his teeth lined up almost exactly with what a modern herbalist might use to treat nausea and inflammation. Neanderthals, a species popular culture still likes to draw as club-wielding brutes, appear to have understood self-medication, not instinct, selection. They were choosing specific plants for specific symptoms, tens of thousands of years before anyone wrote a word down. Chapter 3: The Iceman's Tattoos. So what did treatment actually look like day to day? For that, you don't need theory. You have a body. In 1991, hikers found a mummified man preserved in ice on the border of Austria and Italy. Researchers named him Ötzi. He lived roughly 5,300 years ago, and his frozen body came with something nobody expected: 61 tattoos, made not from ink for decoration, but from soot rubbed into small incisions. Here's the detail that reframes everything. When researchers mapped the tattoos against his skeleton using X-ray and CT scans, they found the marks clustered on joints and along his lower spine, areas later scans showed had degenerative damage, arthritis, and were consistent with chronic pain. The tattoos sat on or beside acupuncture points still used today, thousands of years before acupuncture was formally documented in China. Ötzi was also carrying a fungus called Piptoporus betulinus, birch polypore, which has mild antibacterial properties and was likely used as medicine. This wasn't a man decorating himself. This was quite possibly a 5,000-year-old pain management chart, tattooed directly onto the body it was treating. Chapter 4: The Man Who Couldn't Have Survived Alone. But medicine isn't only plants and incisions. Sometimes it's other people. And this next case might be the most human discovery in the whole story. In the 1950s, Archaeologists excavating Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq uncovered the remains of a Neanderthal man, later called Shanidar I, who lived around 45,000 years ago. His skeleton told a brutal story: a withered right arm, likely amputated below the elbow, blindness in one eye from a healed skull fracture, and hearing loss. Anthropologist Eric Trinkhaus, who studied the remains extensively starting in the 1980s, pointed out something the injuries alone couldn't explain. This man lived for years, maybe decades, after his injuries. A one-armed, partially blind, partially deaf Neanderthal in an Ice Age landscape does not survive alone. Someone fed him, someone helped him travel, someone kept him alive long after he stopped being useful for hunting. That's not instinct either. That's care, extended towards someone who could offer nothing back but companionship. The evidence for compassion is older than the evidence for writing. Chapter 5. The body as the first pharmacy. So what killed all of this? The plant knowledge, the surgery, the community caregiving? The answer is simpler than you'd think. Nothing killed it. We just outsourced it. For most of human history, illness was a shared event. You got sick in your home, surrounded by people who knew which leaves to boil, whose job it was to sit with you, and what a fever like this one usually meant because they'd seen it before in someone else, the winter before that. By the late 1800s, in industrializing cities across Europe and North America, illness started moving out of homes and into institutions. Hospitals became places you went to be treated by strangers, using knowledge those strangers alone possessed. It was a genuine medical improvement. It was also the quiet end of something else: sickness as a communal experience instead of an isolated one. Here's a small piece of hidden history buried in that shift. The word quarantine comes from the Venetian phrase quaranta giorni, 40 days. Starting in the 1300s, ships arriving in Venice during plague outbreaks were forced to anchor offshore for 40 days before anyone could disembark. Not because 40 was medically precise. It was a number borrowed from the Bible, echoing the 40 days of Lent and the 40 days of the flood. An entire branch of modern public health policy is named after a religious number that had almost nothing to do with how disease actually spreads. We inherited the isolation. We forgot the reasoning. For roughly 300,000 years, being sick meant being surrounded. It meant someone pressing a bitter plant into your hand because they remembered it working on their mother. It meant tattoos placed exactly where the pain lived. It meant a broken, blinded man kept alive for decades by people who had no medical training, only each other. Tonight, you'll take your pills alone in a kitchen in silence, and you'll get better. Probably faster, probably more safely than any of them ever did. But no one will boil anything for you. No one will sit beside you and wait. We traded the tribe for the cure. That's the answer, but it opens up more questions than it solves. If you're the type who can't leave a why unanswered, subscribe, because that's basically the whole channel. And drop your own question below. There's a good chance it becomes the next video.